One is an American classic turned AFI staple. The other is scary as hell. Wizard of Oz. They remade it.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob. Today we're talking about the Wonderful Wizard.
Woo! On this, incredibly freezing day. It's middle of February, and we are both trapped inside with varying levels of blizzard outside.
It is freezing outside, and in some places, I think where you are, it's snowing.
Yep, it is here.
It's crazy.
It was like, it was just kind of a light Silent Hill style mist earlier, and now it's just snow.
Oh, that's spooky.
Yeah, it was weird going in this morning because I was just like driving in. I was like, or I was waking up. I was like, I'm going to crack at it with the day, just go in nice, bright and early. And then I walk outside. I'm like, oh no, this is a bad sign.
Now, is it enough snow to wake you up from poppy poisoning?
Maybe if I open the window.
Let all that cold air in, hit the microphone.
Yeah.
All right. So we've established that it's cold.
Yeah.
And what do you do when it's cold? You sit inside and you watch things because you have nothing better to do. Or I guess you play games, but this is not the place for that.
Yeah, no.
So what have you been watching throughout the winter?
Just a couple small things between me just hanging out on my own and then going up to the girlfriend and such. Rewatched Lilo and Stitch, Coraline, and
great.
The most recent one I am losing now, Atlantis, Lost Empire.
Lots of animated stuff.
I've been on an animation kick, especially lately, and just like I guess Disney stuff in general, which is good for what we're doing. But it's just it's mostly just like stuff on Netflix. So I'm like, you know what? I unironically used to love these movies, so I'm gonna watch them.
You know what? Atlantis is in that weird category of Disney films that came out around the same time. It was like Atlantis, Treasure Planet, and Brother Bear.
Oh yeah, the kind of experimental era.
Yeah, it gets no recognition. By recently, I mean within the past 2 years, I did a Disney thing. I didn't complete it because I kept jumping around. I should go back and do it straight through. Mm-hmm. But I rewatched those 3 movies, and Home on the Range, I guess. Oh, and I think Atlantis is the only one of those 4 that's any good.
Really?
Treasure Planet looks interesting, but I think it's really boring. I think Brother Bear is boring, and I think Home on the Range is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
I think I really only love... Yeah, that is something I realize now. I really only love Treasure Planet because of the visuals and everything.
Oh yeah, it looks great, but outside of that, I think it's too dull.
Yeah, not a lot happens. I mean, it's based off Treasure Island, and even that book itself is kind of dull.
Right, but I mean, Muppet Treasure Island withstands the test of time.
Well, yes.
Half of that is due to Tim Curry, but
I'd say
that's a good movie.
I'd say a solid at least 60% of that is Tim Curry.
Tim Curry heightens anything.
Yeah. Imagine if they had Tim Curry in Treasure Planet.
The animated well, duh, that's the only one.
Well, yeah.
That'd be good.
If they had
he was
him
still
for
doing
Silver.
Voice acting then.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
He played Long John Silver in the Treasure Island, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would have been awesome. They would have had to redesign the character though.
Yeah, probably.
Oh well. So just those 3 then?
That I can think of. Otherwise, it's just been like, a couple TV show episodes and then just replaying a couple games.
All right. Cool. So, the Oscars are coming up soon.
Oh, yeah. Fact, so I'm guessing you're catching up on those.
The 24th of February, which is going to be like a week and a half when this comes out. I am very far behind, and that is my own fault. Again, not a podcast to talk about games, but Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, and I didn't watch anything for about a week. All I did was play that game until I completed it.
God damn.
So,
like, complete?
Oh, you know how I complete.
You are an insane man.
So, I mean, that's done now, so hopefully I can get caught up, but I'm very far behind. Gotcha. So, first off, I don't think I talked about it last time. First Man. Did I mention this?
I don't think you did. No.
Okay, I couldn't remember if I did because it was very close to our last episode record time. But First Man is, the movie about Armstrong
Of course. Neil
going to the
Armstrong.
moon, whatever.
Them folk going to the moon and whatnot.
Yeah, it's up for an Oscar for visual effects, and I could not tell you why. I don't know why it is. It
Really?
doesn't look very visually stunning. It has like rockets taking off, and it has lights and that view of the Earth. But I can think of hundreds upon hundreds of movies that have done that before.
Yeah. I think it's just like the state of Hollywood that any time that you make a space movie, you pretty much get it a nomination as a gimme.
I guess so. Like that scene, the visual effects category seems very. It seems more poppy. Avengers: Infinity War and Ready Player One are both up for Oscars, but only for the visual effects.
Hmm.
It seems like it's its own separate award show for that one category.
I did actually see a headline floating around. I don't know whether it's confirmed or not, but that they might this year to save on time since they've had so many issues, they'll be giving the less popular Oscars during the commercial breaks.
That's actually hilarious.
I think that's might be what's going on with this one. So it's like, all right, visual effects and everything. I can imagine that's just gonna be in a little commercial break. I don't think anyone's gonna care.
I mean, if they do it, they do it. But man, that kind of.
It's kind of low.
Oh well. Yeah, I think so. I don't know what to say about that.
I'm sure they'll do a thing where the award giving and acceptance speech will be an extra thing online or something.
Oh yeah, I'll actually get to that in a bit. Award show being online now.
Yeah.
So secondly, I watched Bandersnatch on Netflix.
Oh yeah.
The Black Mirror bit.
Yeah, I watched that a few weeks ago, I think.
That was cool. I liked it, and I like that that's a form of media that we can do now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why people are blowing it up to such an incredible degree, like the choose your own adventure aspect, because I mean, in such big form, I guess, like Netflix streaming platform, and there's no loading time, but that type of media has been around for a while. I can think back to not critically acclaimed, but quite a few YouTube series that did that.
All right.
So
I think it's more just people just clamoring over it as the fact that it's a Black Mirror episode, and it's it's the deeper meaning behind it. It's are you truly choosing your own adventure, or is there no real choice in life? It's that sort of thing.
That's some of the cool stuff that they did with it. They did invert that to some degree. It's not really spoiling anything because there's so many different endings you can get.
Right.
But there is a bit where I remember picking a choice, but he was starting to realize he wasn't in control, so he fought against it and deliberately did not do what I told him to do. Mm-hmm. So there is some of that.
That's cool.
Which is nice.
It made me interested in the rest of the Black Mirror series in general. I need to go back and watch some of those.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I need to finish it, but I remember liking what I saw.
Yeah. For some reason, I was under the impression it was a show about... I think it was a more actual serialized drama and not individual Twilight Zone style things.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I thought it was one continuous weird sort of future, and I was that sounds boring.
Well, it does sound boring. I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah, and then I saw all the episode premises. I was okay, this would be a very confusing universe if they were all in one.
Okay, next I saw Medea Family Funeral.
Is that up for an Oscar?
I'm joking.
Oh.
I saw the Medea Family Funeral poster because it's not out yet.
Oh.
On my way into the movie theater to see Into the Spiderverse finally.
Oh yay! How'd you like it?
I loved it.
Yes, I knew you would.
I'm gonna be honest. I think about this, and this is coming from someone who I'm not too into the Marvel Cinematic. I know this isn't a part. I'm not too into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I can think of 2 films I've seen from it that I like.
Mm-hmm.
But just superhero movies in general, I think the only ones that I really, really like are the first 2 Batman movies, the Tim Burton ones from the 80s,
mm-hmm.
and Into the Spider-Verse. I kind of like Spider-Man 1, but I wouldn't put it there. I think there's only 3 superhero movies that I really, truly enjoy, Into the Spider-Verse was definitely one of them.
Oh yeah. It's so cool. There's so much love behind the animation and everything. It's just like,
I know it's stylistically unique. It does comic book things without making it a comic book movie. People kept saying that it was formatted like a comic book, and I was thinking, like panels, like Scott Pilgrim did,
mm-hmm. Which is just dumb.
which wasn't all the time, obviously, but
Right, but they still did it. And I'm just like, eh.
Yeah.
Or like it's like the original Hulk movie.
Oh, God, exactly like that. You know what? That is more of what I was thinking. Is that original Hulk movie. But instead, what they were meaning is like the squiggle lines for Spider Sense, and sometimes his inner thoughts appear as like a box. There's not a lot of like, there's actual panels on the screen, and here's a page.
My favorite little detail is when they're running from this one facility, and one of them picks up a bagel, and as they're running, they throw it back at another person and beans them in the head. And it's off in the distance, and so it hits them, and they see the little graphic pop up. It'll be like a little pow. But if you look closely, it actually says bagel. Like when it gets hit. Like I love this movie.
It is funny. Actually, I remember that escaping from the facility scene kind of reminded me of a ride at Universal. I think that'd make a good 4D motion coaster ride.
It would.
Where the screen is like playing on in front of you.
The whole movie really would. There's a lot of cool scenes like with like effects and everything they could totally take advantage of.
Definitely. I'm glad it's up for an Oscar. And looking at the ones that I've seen in that Best Animated Feature category, I think it has a good chance. So I have two more things that I'm going to talk about real quick.
Yep.
Isle of Dogs, I saw.
Nice.
It's also up for Best Animated Feature. I don't know if you saw this. A lot of people slept on it.
I wanted to. I never got around to it.
I feel bad that not as many people watched it as they could have. Because I really like it. I like the style of it.
Good old Wes Anderson.
I mean, I just I like the symmetry that he always does too.
It's a very comforting shot style he does.
Yeah. I like style, and I like the characters of the film. A lot of them exhibit like characteristics that they don't harp on, like I'm the smart one or I'm the jealous one. Like, I don't know. Like, there's this one dog that loves to gossip, and it's a part of his character, and it flows into the other dialogue so well because they're almost overlapping with their dialogue. Sometimes they'll be doing something, and that one dog is just like, well, I heard this thing about the Outlands. And one of the other dogs like, who told you that? It's like, oh, what's his name on top of the hill? Oh, really? What do you say? And there's a lot of free-flowing dialogue in that I really like.
Oh, yeah. He does realistic characters very well. Or maybe not necessarily realistic, but like realistic dialogue at least.
Yeah. But that's going to lead into my last thing real quick. The Annies. The 2019 Annies. I did not see the Golden Globes, but I actually did watch the entirety of the Annie Awards online because they do that now.
Like the video game awards.
I don't watch those.
Good. Neither do I. That's insane.
I haven't watched those in a while. But I felt bad because the Isle of Dogs was up for a ton of awards, but it didn't like win any. The only one that it won was, I think it was for best voiceover performance in a theatrical feature, and it was Bryan Cranston as the lead dog in this movie. And he didn't even show up.
That's a really specific award. Like the voiceover.
Well, I mean, the Annie Awards are the animation awards, so those are the only acting awards they give out are for voiceover performances.
All right, I guess. Still, it sounds
they do
vaguely.
It for
yeah.
Sorry.
It just sounds very specific when just with that title.
Yeah, it does. They have to elaborate. I think the only two actor awards they give out there are for voiceover in TV and voiceover in movie. But yeah, it's funny because he didn't even show up, and Jim Cummings was co-hosting that segment. And I remember him asking for Bryan Cranston to come to the stage, and him just saying, "Did anyone from this movie even show up to this thing?"
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh well.
But that was fun because Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won like 8 awards, so.
Oh, that's good at least.
It literally swept the Annies.
Wow.
But yeah, that's everything that I watched. Hopefully, I will catch up, especially on the best pictures before the Oscars, even, because those will
Yeah.
come before our next episode.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And maybe we'll do a little reflection afterwards. It doesn't have to be a whole big thing.
Yeah, true. I'm almost certainly not gonna watch them. I'll just look at the results later.
Yeah.
So.
But all that aside, let's get to the real reason we're here.
The Wizard of Oz.
To discuss. Oh, The Wizard of Oz? Okay.
Oh, what were you gonna say?
I watched something else. But you know what? I'm just going to bluff my way through it and see what happens.
All right, cool. I should also just say for the record, every episode I have done that, I am not clear on what this show is at all.
All right, starting with 1939's The Wizard of Oz, we open in a very realistic interpretation of Kansas with a palette of brown and slightly lighter brown. And here we meet Dorothy Gale, played by Judy Garland, running back to her farm run by her Aunt Em, Clara Banwick, and Uncle Henry, Charlie Grapewin. A woman named Miss Gulch, Margaret Hamilton, who apparently owns half the county they live in, has it out for Dorothy's dog Toto and wishes to, in her own words, destroy it. Dorothy tries telling her aunt, uncle, and 3 farmhands, but all are too busy to help. Gulch drops by with papers, allowing her to confiscate the dog, and she leaves with it. Toto escapes back to Dorothy, and they run away from home. They soon meet a man named Mr. Marvel, played by Frank Morgan, who convinces her to go back home, and she arrives in the midst of a tornado only to be slammed on the head while she's in the house, causing her to pass out. After some trippy effects from inside the tornado, the house lands, and she comes to and meets Glinda the Good Witch, played by Billy Burke, and the people of Munchkinland. They show her that she has killed the Wicked Witch of the East, and after a confrontation with the Wicked Witch of the West, Glinda fixes the ruby slippers of the deceased hag to her feet and sends her on her way to the Emerald City to see a wizard who can send her home. Along the way, she runs into the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger, who desires a brain, the Tin Man, Jack Haley, who desires a heart, and the Cowardly Lion, Bert Lahr, who desires the nerve. Though the Wicked Witch attempts to intervene, she is constantly thwarted, and they soon make it to the Emerald City. They get in to see the wizard, who promises them their items if they can bring him the witch's broomstick. They make their way there through a rather abrupt cut, but the trio of costume freaks finds themselves sneaking in after Dorothy is kidnapped by the witch's flying monkeys. They free her, but all get cornered, and as the witch casts Faraga on the Scarecrow, Dorothy throws water and melts the witch. They take the broomstick to the wizard, only to reveal a con man behind the curtain to the left. He gives them all what they wanted, sort of, but abandons Dorothy in the city as his hot air balloon takes off into the stratosphere. Glinda tells her she could always go home. After a lesson? Really? Glinda sucks. And this leads to Dorothy waking up to the whole cast hovering over her worried sick. We cut to the end title card, with the audience assuming that Miss Gulch will be back again for the dog tomorrow. Next on to Return to Oz, 1985. Aunt Em is fed up with Dorothy, now played by a young Fairuza Balk, yammering about Oz, so she takes her to an asylum where a doctor, his nurse, and his assistants offer to house her overnight using new experimental electrical equipment on her mind so that she'll stop having Oz dreams. During a storm, the power goes out, and while everyone is investigating the problem, a girl in white shows up to free Dorothy from her restraints, and they escape, only to fall into a rushing river, and then everything goes black. Dorothy wakes up alongside her chicken from back on the farm, Bellina, voiced by Denise Breyer. Oh yeah, she can now talk. And they make their way through the woods, finding the ruined yellowed brick road, which leads them to the ruins of the Emerald City, now inhabited by a group called the Wheelers, who chase her into a room where she finds a wind-up man named Tick-Tock, voiced by Sean Barrett, who helps her to beat up the Wheelers, who escort the 3 to Mombi, played by Jean Marsh, who now presides over the city. She wants Dorothy's head for a collection, so she locks her in the tower where she finds Jack Pumpkinhead, voiced by Brian Henson. He helps her leave the tower, and while she steals a life potion from Mombi, Tick-Tock, Bellina, and Jack create a flying sofa with the head of a gump, which is sort of a moose. Dorothy brings back the potion as Mombi chases her. They bring the gump, Lyle Conway, does the voice now, to life, and they fly out the window over the Desert of Death, or whatever the hell it's called, and then they crash land outside the Gnome King's lair, who is played by Nicole Williamson. He brings the group in and reveals that he has the Scarecrow, played by Just In Case, which is not a joke name, and he has him turned into an ornament in his collection. He offers to play a game with the group to allow them to guess which one is him, which is very Indiana Jones-like. After some mishaps, Dorothy guesses correctly. Bellina lays an egg in the Gnome King's mouth, which somehow kills him, and Dorothy uses her ruby slippers, which she obtained from the Gnome King, to which the Emerald City fixed, and teleport them all there. Dorothy frees Ozma, the Queen of Oz, I guess, and goes back home with Billina staying in Oz. Back in Kansas, it's shown the asylum burned down with the doctor dead and the nurses being carted away for some reason. The end.
With the end moral of, if you have a escapist fantasy that might seem a little weird, do what the rest of us do. Suppress that shit and do not tell anyone, you idiot.
Yeah, just seriously don't even talk about it.
You can go to a home for that.
If you had not escaped, you would have died there. You probably would have died there. You would have been tied up, the lightning would have struck, and you would have died with Dr. What's-his-name.
And
so,
if you didn't,
happy?
And even if that didn't happen, you'd have electrodes attached to your head for weeks.
Have fun. Okay, so before we get too far, I'm going to do the full circle now. So, starting with The Wizard of Oz, 1939, we have John Lee Mahin, who did dialogue and continuity writing for Scarface, but he was also an uncredited contributing writer on A Star is Born and The Wizard of Oz, which I don't know how much you looked into this movie, The Wizard of Oz, I mean, but there's quite a lot of information about the numerous drafts that were made for the film before it was actually created.
Didn't look into it too much, but at this point I've seen the movie a couple of times in my life, so I'm just kind of like, yeah, right, I pretty much know this.
Like the dance contest that was cut?
Didn't know that.
I'll talk about some of that later. But we also have a connection between The Wizard of Oz and A Star is Born, the 1937 version, with Clara Blandick, who played Auntie M in The Wizard of Oz, and Aunt Maddie in A Star is Born.
That's where I
plays a lot
recognize
of
her.
ants, I guess. Yes.
That's where I recognize it. Oh my god.
I guess she just, she's typecast. She was typecast as an ant, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, moving on to Return to Oz, 1985, there's one connection, believe it or not, with The Karate Kid from 2010.
Dang.
Studio...
That movie, I swear, it keeps coming back up into everything.
I think you're right. I think Karate Kid is like the center of the cinematic universe.
It's not even in our country.
But I just picked this because I found it really interesting. But this woman named Mary Jo McVeigh, I guess,
Probably McVeigh.
She's been studio teaching since Return to Oz. That was the first film she taught studio-wise. And she's still doing it, up to most recently on the set of A Dog's Journey, which I believe comes out this year, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, isn't that movie that the trailer basically spoiled the entire thing?
I think so.
Yeah. Like even
I don't know how much there is to be spoiled.
I mean, but it even shows the scene, a scene right where the ending would be. So it's like, all right, it's like we get it.
Great film.
Yeah. Dog leaves, comes back. The end. Moving on.
Lastly, to tie this all off, I don't know if you're going to be surprised or not, but Return to Oz has a lot in common with Little Shop of Horrors, 1986.
I mean, I'd assume Jim Henson.
Well, Jim Henson's son, Brian Henson, who he was one of the principal puppeteers on Audrey 2, but he was also the voice and puppeteer. He was a puppeteer for and voice of Jack Pumpkinhead.
Oh.
So whenever he speaks or whenever his head stretches upwards, that's Brian Henson.
Well.
We also have John Alexander, who was another puppeteer for the Audrey 2 plant. He puppeted the Cowardly Lion all by himself. That was him.
All two scenes.
All two scenes. And Mac Wilson actually was a doo-wop street singer in Little Shop of Horrors and was the puppeteer for the chicken, Billina. So...
That's a little
we
random,
got some puppeteers crossing... Yeah, we got some puppeteers crossing in and out here.
I mean,
But,
I feel like in that specific era of Hollywood, that was a pretty small circle. This is a very specialized craft for when it was around.
Which is kind of sad because now it's pretty much gone. It's like it didn't even have a chance to really grow, I guess.
Yeah. And that's cool to look at the random moments in technological history, just being like, hey, we had this for a bit, but then things got, better or worse for one particular reason, and it was like, all right, this is gone.
Yeah, but like I said, that's all I have for Full Circle. So
Not too bad.
let's just get.
We haven't had a lot of big
Sorry.
ones. That's good, at least.
Oh yeah, we haven't had anything really long. I think since I remember Oceans being bad.
Yeah, Oceans was bad.
But besides that, yeah, we have yet to hit a really big one.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start on this? Where do you want to go?
Oh man, like first and foremost, I gotta say, super surprised at Return to Oz. Like when you like on the surface, someone ever told me, like if someone told me, like when you told me, there's a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, I would immediately think that sounds horrible. It sounds like one of those cheap rip-off Disney sequels that they did. Like they did the sequel to the Secret of Nim. Like when it went from Don Bluth to like that cheap to that really cheap animation. It's just like, all right, no.
any of the other Disney sequels like this technically is, like Cinderella 3 where they travel through time, or
it's just like
Bambi 2.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, but then I went into into Return to Oz with that mindset, and I was very pleasantly surprised. This was a really good movie. Like it's not a musical. It's based off of the original books, like the second and third book in the original Oz trilogy. And it's like, it's darker. It's got an actually like age appropriate main actress. It really surprised me, and I was actually very, very, very pleased with it.
I am so glad that you liked it,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
we don't have to have like a conversation about it, because I actually did watch Return to Oz as a child, and pretty much all I remembered about it was it scaring me. And so going back to it and watching it, there are definitely flaws. Parts of the movie that I didn't like, or where logic was just confusing, but I still enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's definitely that's great.
I was very pleasantly surprised going into it. Especially like it really did grip me like originally when like right from the get go, just being in the portions in Kansas, because it retained kind of the same style that they were going for in the original. Which it should be said that it's kind of unfair to call this a direct sequel to the original Wizard of Oz, because like I said, it's referencing the original books more than anything, whereas there's just a couple nods to the original, like the fact that she has ruby slippers, whereas in the original book they were silver, or some of the character designs are kind of consistent, and just like a couple little like side items.
Mm-hmm.
And so
sorry,
continue. No, you go ahead. I was just gonna like add another throwaway comment.
Well, the main thing that ties these two films together, by all means, this should be an adaptation of the books and not a direct sequel, but any promotional anything, even the back of the DVD, so you know it came out fairly recently, the back of the DVD I own, anything refers to it as an unofficial sequel, including Disney itself, but also the ruby slippers, Disney actually had to license from MGM to be able to use them. So they could have just made them silver slippers, but since everyone knows them as ruby, they put in the extra money to be able to use that right, which I think ties the two films together a lot more.
Yeah. There was like, I remember seeing like there was even there's a thrown away bit in the script where it was going to be, which also references the books, that it's the ruby slippers would have been destroyed and turned into a ruby belt that the Gnome King would have been wearing, or something like that. I don't know. It's just like another little add-on to it.
Yeah. I mean, with the exception that I guess she would have to wear the belt at some point. I don't see why they didn't just do that. It would have saved them the money, but maybe the slippers are just so iconic. They wanted them in there.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main draw. Like, you can't really, like, that's with how iconic they are. Like, literally, one of the trivia facts of it is that the original slippers are on display in the Smithsonian, and they're so popular that the carpet around the display has to regularly be replaced due to so much wear and tear.
This movie, The Wizard of Oz, is. I was really struggling when I was writing the opening for this because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to use the word classic because I feel like we've used it once or twice before, but I was like, that's what it is.
It's
That's why I included the AFI Topper thing because it is on so many Film
yeah,
Institute lists
it's
at the very top even.
I think a few places credit it as being the most watched film in history, given that how often it's shown on TV, how many different re-releases there have been for it, and how it's basically just allowed to be played anywhere. It's like you can play it on family channels, like more adult channels, and it's just everywhere. And it makes sense. Like I mean, yeah, to not call this thing a class, it's impossible to not call this thing a classic. Like it's like up there with Gone with the Wind and fucking like Citizen Kane. With when you think old movies, you think of this.
You know what? I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Wizard of Oz is probably the oldest film that people watch regularly.
Yeah, like there aren't like all the other films, like even Citizen Kane and Gone with the Wind. No one really like if someone sees that on TV, they're not necessarily going to go to that. But Wizard of Oz, yeah, heck yeah. Or are you watching it with family and that sort of thing? Because you can't really watch Gone with the Wind and Citizen Kane with family.
Definitely.
At least not with a fun family.
You know what? That's true.
It's like maybe in my family where we can be into stuff like that, but in just like a pretty regular family, it's like yeah, just Wizard of Oz.
But that also being said, when is the last time you watched The Wizard of Oz? Like before you did it for this show?
Oh man, probably. I mean, well over a decade at least.
It was probably 8 or 9.
It was our family in particular did have a particular like for it because I think my sister had done a production of it in high school where she actually got Dorothy, and so I think for a long time it was just kind of a consistently known just fact in our household, and so it would have been if her in high school, yeah, that would have been maybe a decade, maybe 12 years ago last time I would have seen it.
Wow.
But yeah, it's just
You know what? I think that's true. I think I might have been 10 or 11 when I last watched it instead because we actually did do a production for it in elementary school, and I was the scarecrow in that.
oh nice.
I think my mother still has the costume somewhere.
Hmm.
But yeah, basically what I'm getting at is that while we are saying this is a film that I'm sure there are people that watch it regularly and it's easy to go back to and just watch it. I had not seen it in quite some time. So
Yeah,
there are a lot of things that really stood out to me that
I
I don't remember or even knew that existed.
right, and I also do realize now it's like I remember watching back through. It's like I this plot is weirdly reminiscent to me. I don't know why it's so in the forefront of my mind. I realize now because it's since then I had watched the play Wicked, and so a lot of
Yeah.
it's like, and I gotta tell you, with between the original Wicked and now Return to Oz, there are 3 different canons for this world in my head now, and I am so damn confused.
Now you got to read the books and
Exactly,
take in that canon.
because Wicked is technically based off the canon of the original film,
Right.
but it itself changes a few things for its own story, and then Return to Oz is based off the books, but not completely, and it's just like ah. And so going into Return to Oz with the slight differences, I was like, God damn it.
You know, there are strange things that I picked up in The Wizard of Oz just in watching it again that I don't know if they come directly for the book or what their reasoning is, but there's so many weird choices in this film. Like in Munchkin Land when they're doing that song, they run by and wake up babies sleeping in a bird's nest. And I thought that was odd. I don't know why that was there.
Yeah,
Uh
a lot of like that. It seems like a lot of older films that are tried to be more fantastical don't really have what we'd consider like our modern interpretation of fantastical. Because in like Return to Oz or Labyrinth and that sort of thing. And I should say, I'm probably going to reference Labyrinth a lot in this because they are this Labyrinth and Return to Oz are basically the same movie when you get right down to it. It's like it just instead of David Bowie, there's a claymation rock man.
I guess the motives are different, but
Yeah,
there's some overlap there.
yeah. At least there's the just the general overarching stuff. But like I said, but back to the point. I mean, is like a lot of modern fantastical elements tend to just kind of be like maybe a little vague, but still ultimately just kind of like, oh, cool fairy tale stuff. Whereas a lot of older films I've noticed have just like either they must be based off of older myths or older, just cultural things. They just get really weird little details sometimes, like the munchkins in the bird's nest and stuff. It's just like it really. They're just like, let's just do something that just no society would do. Like this is just weird.
Yeah, it actually made me uncomfortable because I guess I'm kind of saying that as a joke, but also not really because I remember being like, why is that a thing? And I think I focused on it for too long. I eventually had to just keep watching the movie, but
Yeah,
um, there is one thing.
that was me with the Wheelers and the Return to Oz.
Oh yeah,
Which
so Return to Oz is very dark and very scary.
oh yeah,
Uh,
it's terrifying.
but there's one thing that I remember writing down in Wizard of Oz when I was taking notes on it that I picked up on. I never really thought about before. But when they find the Tin Man, he's talking about how he was in the process of chopping down a tree and then he rusted over and he's been stuck that way because it started to rain, I think.
Yeah,
Uh, I find it rather odd that we come across this Tin Man and he tells us his life story that involves chopping down a tree right after we have a scene with sentient trees. Like,
yeah.
are all trees sentient? Is there like a degree of sentience? Are some of them? I want to know how that works because then I guess in Return to Oz there's like a lunch pail tree, which is like the first thing that they see in Oz when she gets there, but it
Yeah.
doesn't smack her for taking the lunch pail berries.
It's like I really do think they and I think that, like I really get down to it. Like that's my one of my bigger complaints with the original Wizard of Oz is that it really doesn't seem to have a string of its own logic that it's going by, even though even by the standard of Oz, where everything's meant to be strange and otherworldly, because it really is just played up to be a dream from Dorothy. Like whereas in Return to Oz, it is meant to be established that Oz does actually exist. Um, but it in the original Wizard of Oz, it really doesn't have its own consistent string of logic because we have the we barely learn about the Wicked Witch of the East. That's just kind of there and gone. We barely have time to establish with the Munchkins and all that they're doing, and then we go straight to the Scarecrow. We have the scene with the sentient trees. We go to the Tin Man, who is also chopping down some kind of trees, but not the same kind of trees, and then it just goes on and on through all these various things and just these various little locales, and then right up to the end with the Wicked Witch of the West with just the random out of nowhere weakness of that she just melts with water. It's like
Yeah, I wrote that down too. It's never something that I really thought about, but why is water such a
I don't. I wish I had looked it up, and it may have just been some like old myth of the day, like maybe like witches can't be hit with like some kind of water. Like there's the myth that vampires can't cross a moving water source or something.
oh
But like
hmm
it really just kind of seems like it's just kind of stringing along, meant to be these very localized fantastical elements just for the sake of the audience. Whereas the Return to Oz, it does definitely feel like all of these things happen for some strange reason that we just personally can't understand. Like there's the fact that the princess. What was the princess's name? The with the heads.
oh Mombi?
Mombi. Like there's the Princess Mombi who's living in the ruins of Oz, who has stolen the heads from other beautiful women and switches them out like just as a fashion accessory, and each of them still having their own sentience and their own memories and everything. It's just in seeing that it's creepy and it's otherworldly, and it like feels in fitting with what we've seen so far. Like we have creatures that have wheels on their arms and legs that they use to get around and all these other things, like this fully mechanical clockwork soldier. it really does feel like there is a consistent string of logic in that we could not possibly follow it with anything of the information that we could have at this point. Whereas Wizard of Oz just kind of like just strings us along. It just kind of has fun with it.
Yeah,
It just
that's true.
it really just seems more like guys sitting around a table being like, "What's another weird thing they could run into? Poppy field, go."
I
Allegory to heroin, boom. I mean opium, whatever.
that is something that kind of confused me though in Return to Oz is that there's all these heads that I don't know if Jack Pumpkinhead is like a reliable narrator. I don't see any reason for him not to be, but he says that the reason she hasn't done anything with him is because she was wearing head number 22, so she probably hasn't worn the head since and therefore has forgotten about him.
Mm-hmm.
But by that logic, I don't know, the heads that she gathered from the maidens of Emerald City, should they not have their own memories? Is there some way that she connects them to herself?
I think maybe it tries to establish like that her body itself might have some level of control. I mean, we literally see the body asleep and somehow snoring at one point without a head.
That's right, it is snoring.
So it's like it's kind of questionable to ask. Is like, is her original head truly her defining thing, or like is there still a connection between the original head and the body, or something like that? But again, it's one of those things where it establishes enough rules that we can kind of work with it, and that it stays at least solid in its foundation. But it's also so mysterious and so otherworldly creepy that we can't really understand it.
You know what? I guess what you're saying is pretty much true, because there are weird fantastical elements of The Wizard of Oz, but it really hammers home in a lot of ways the fact that it's sort of a dream state. Whereas Return to Oz, there's the narrative that she's like in the river, so maybe she passed out, she's unconscious, and this is sort of a dream. But it doesn't rely on the dream narrative all that much. It feels much more like this is a real place. She created it with her imagination, but she also is actually here.
Yeah.
Or at least that it feels like that's more of what they were going for.
Right. And that's kind of what I was saying near to the beginning, just kind of the idea of that in Return to Oz, Oz is kind of more of an escapist fantasy than anything, whereas in the original Wizard of Oz, it's kind of more just this chaotic dream that she has, just as a result of this twister, and the kind of she establishes this whole escapist fantasy thing that she can escape to, where it still has its own set of rules. I mean, we've all had like at some point we've daydreamed about a different place we could be, but it's still like there is still limits within it. There's still conflict, there's still fear, there's still other things beyond it. It's just somewhere other than where we are now, which is kind of interesting. Like it's kind of makes it a little bit more confusing as to whether or not how we're supposed to interpret the whole story. But I really liked thinking about that aspect, like especially the fact that she's taken to an asylum to be treated, and so it inevitably, and like it establishes that since she's able to escape with the help of Ozma, that Oz exists. Like there's no way she could have gotten out otherwise.
You know what? That's true. It has to.
Yeah.
For her restraints.
But like and I'm sure there's still arguments to be made that maybe they could have gotten out. She could have gotten out in some other sense, but that does kind of really establish it definitively there. But it also just kind of goes to the idea of maybe it's just this idea of escape in general. It immediately kind of hammers it home there with the getting out of there during the storm.
You know what? I kind of want to go back through the opening scenes of the movie where Ozma is helping her escape and the nurse is chasing them, to see if the nurse like focuses in on Ozma at all.
I think at one point,
if she like recognizes her, or like not recognizes her, but like looks at her and sees that she's there.
I think at one point, it's kind of like it's said in the middle of the storm, and even the subtitles said like assorted yelling or whatever, but you can kind of hear her yell "get them," and so it might be that, but beyond that, I'm not certain.
Okay.
And I think even the director himself established at some point it's like Oz is meant to exist in this universe, but
I mean, exist or not exist, there definitely is that imaginative in both films, whether she's sleeping or drowning, there is that sort of imagination that sparks it, because that's how we get, in the case of both films, how we get character analogs
Mm-hmm.
to one another. Like, so in The Wizard of Oz, I didn't really take the time to bring it up. But let me just grab my thing here. We have, boy, where'd I put it? We have Ray Bolger as the Scarecrow, Jack Haley as the Tin Man, and Burt Lahr as the Cowardly Lion, who all show up in the opening scenes in Kansas. They're all different farmhands, and I guess going into the movie having already seen it, and even if you hadn't seen it, you like know what it's about at this point. It's so well revered.
Yeah, of course.
But it's pretty heavy-handed, like the conversations that they're giving to her, like, well, you think your head was filled with straw, like stuff like that.
Right, and then like analogs to when one of them is like they'll make a statue of me as he's
which I obviously didn't pick up on when I watched it when I was younger, but
right.
Like, I get that now immediately.
Oh yeah,
and so that's why I'm kind of hesitant to call it ham-fisted, because I didn't know it until this watch.
exactly. Like kind of like I learned about the fact that they were meant to be stand-ins in the story itself years after I had first seen it, and I was like, what? That's not a thing. They were clearly different. One of them was a lion, not a dude.
Did they even watch the same movie as me?
It's not a dude who's jumping into some pig pen. It's like, no, that's a genuine farmhand type fella.
Yeah, it's a farmhand type fella. Only one of them in Oz even does real work. He's got an axe and everything.
Yeah.
But we'd also be remiss if we left out Miss Gulch. Who would ever marry her? Played by Margaret Hamilton, who also plays the Wicked Witch of the West.
And God bless Margaret Hamilton, really.
Oh yeah, she's great. Did you ever see her on Mr. Rogers?
I haven't. I want to go, but I know she's been on the episodes, and I've wanted to see her.
Yeah, that was great. But that's kind of it. I was thinking about analogs between the real world and Oz, but besides the characters, I couldn't really place any. Oh, we almost forgot. Frank Morgan is Mr. Marvel or Professor Marvel, whatever, and then he's also the Wizard.
Yeah.
So there's that too. But while I was watching the movie, I only picked up on one other thing, and it seems more like a cute little thing they did rather than an actual like comparison piece or tie between the universes. But I don't know if you noticed the front of Marvel's wagon when they're going in to talk. It says "balloon enthusiast" on the side of it.
Yeah,
I just happened to catch that, and of course, knowing how the movie ends. Seeing that, I was like, oh, wow, that's, like, foreshadowing, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit, at least.
Yeah.
Oz doesn't even... It really is weird thinking between Wizard of Oz and Return to Oz, because they don't... Because, like, so few of the original characters show back up when you really think about it. Like,
yeah,
Oz isn't
they're
there.
All changed vastly.
Yeah, exactly. They're based more on the book than anything. I mean, the lion is actually a lion. The Tin Man looks like a kind of more of a robot. Which, also, the origin story of the Tin Man in this one, like, took me by surprise. Because, like...
I wrote that down. I put down very dark origin for the Tin Man in my notes.
And, I'll just say for the sake of the audience, like, in the original, he just kind of briefly offhand mentions that he like his father was a tinsmith who literally built him like from the ground up. But in Return to Oz, and I guess subsequently the original books, he was actually originally a normal woodsman, but he had like chopped off his leg at some point and had it replaced with tin, and then the Wicked Witch replaced his entire body with tin. And it's like, holy hell. No, wait, no, it was like he kept chopping other parts of himself off, and he kept replacing it with tin. I was like, what the hell?
In the book, maybe the witch does it, but I definitely remember, because it cuts to her in the doctor's office, and that's all she's explaining about Oz.
Yeah, like
that's the part of the conversation you pick up on. She's going, and he just was chopping and chopping and chopping until he was all tin. I was like, what the hell?
It's like, my
I don't remember that.
God. It's like, and it really does, and like they really do hammer that home because she refers to him as the Tin Woodsman specifically in Return to Oz, whereas he's just the Tin Man in the original.
Yeah.
And it's like I saw that, I was like, oh, that's creepy. Like they really do hammer that, and I guess like, and that's just the main overarching thing of both of these is just like the tone is all over the place. Well, not all over the place. They're just very, very different.
Yeah. And I
And I gotta say, I
the
think I prefer the dark tone, honestly, with how strange this world is. It really makes it feel like it feels like an actual world, like we've established, before. It's not just it's not just stringing along set pieces. I mean, there obviously are at various set pieces in each thing, but it really does feel like they're interacting with a world that's going through some crazy shit rather than, oh, here's a dream. There's some babies in a bird's nest. Haha.
I definitely had more fun with Return to Oz. But
Yeah.
I don't want to lose the thread here. Like you said, those three characters are barely in Return to Oz at all. Mainly because she's returning after some period of time.
Mm-hmm.
The lion and the Tin Woodsman are they're there in the Emerald City, but they're one's I guess rusted and the other one is stone, or maybe they're both stone. It doesn't really matter for the Tin Woodsman. He's not moving.
Yeah, they're both stone. Which is like, it's weird because they specifically established that only the living get turned. Well, which, okay, yeah, I guess the Tin Woodsman is alive, like he was a man at one point. Versus like TikTok is literally
he's a machine.
He's literally a machine. Which also, I should say, because like I haven't given enough credit to TikTok, the actor who played him in the suit was like a gymnast who walked on his hands to pilot him.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
like he
was flipped upside down. He was like, I guess, a contortionist or something. He was flipped upside down, and he used his arms to operate the legs, and then his legs to operate the upper portion.
Oh.
Like just like the basic turning and everything. And versus, I think any facial animation stuff was by like another puppeteer. Yeah.
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 Well, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
It's like their equivalent of the R2D2. It's like just
wow.
There's a whole dude in that thing, just walking on his hands. Apparently, there was a lot of discomfort with making this movie. Like even the main young actress, whose name escapes me now, like she couldn't.
Furza Balk.
Thank you. She couldn't wear like any of the shoes that were provided to her for longer than a few minutes because they were horribly uncomfortable, including the ruby slippers, especially. So anytime, she only ever wore them when she absolutely had to be shown, like from her, like her feet would be shown. Otherwise, she was barefoot the entire time.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. I keep losing my.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We adore facts here, especially fun facts. But it actually is interesting because those characters from the first one barely show up at all, so there's no need to have an analog for them anymore. The farmhands aren't even there. They're not even in the movie.
Yeah, no. But I think they, like, I guess they maybe, like, left because they were out of money or something.
Yeah, because the farm had to be rebuilt. It's like, well, there's no work here? I mean, I guess building the house, they could have helped that, but yeah, no money, probably. Yeah. Anywho, we still do have analog characters, but they're... with the exception of the Gnome King and Mombi, they're a lot more obscure. Like, Jack Pumpkinhead is like a pumpkin she gets from Ozma while she's in the asylum.
Yeah.
And TikTok is the machine that the doctor is using. It even has sort of the eyes, and some of the dials make up the mustache.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still clearly pulling things in from that world. They're just... it's darker and there's less human beings that she's starting to pull inanimate objects into this world too. But yeah, the doctor, which is Nicole Williamson, is the Gnome King. He even plays the Gnome King when he's fully human. And the nurse played by what's her name? Why didn't I write some of these down? Jean Marsh is also Mombi with her original head. The other two Mombi heads are different actresses, but the main head is Jean Marsh, who played the nurse.
Yes.
But for analogs, they actually get... They pull more into the world, I think. Like, when he's trying, so the Gnome King specifically, he's becoming more and more human by making people forget Oz, and that's the Doctor's whole goal with Dorothy is, well, at least in Dorothy's mind, is to make her forget about Oz. So they have that going there, but I also found it interesting that when they're playing the guessing game with the ornaments, every time someone guesses wrong, lightning flashes, which is very reminiscent not just of the lightning storm going on at the asylum, but also the electrical components that the Doctor's so fascinated with.
Yeah, like it's actually like the electrotherapy working.
Right. And then, of course, the really hammer it home bit at the end is where the Doctor dies and the nurse is carted away for some reason. I really don't understand that, but there's ties to what happens in Oz with Mombi being imprisoned and the Gnome King being killed.
I think I think it might be like a thing where historically there were more and more um, cases of like asylum workers being revealed to like there's always like the myth that oh asylums are full of these crazy people who are just hurting these nurses and everything when in reality it was the nurses who were like genuinely torturing these people. Like a lot of stories like that were starting to come to light historically, so I think that might be what happened, that like they looked into the affair that was happening there and they realized, oh, they had a bunch of like Ozma mentions it as they're running out that you hear inmates moaning and screaming before they run out, and Ozma says it's literally failed patient experiments that have been locked in the basement, who then were presumably killed in the fire, and they would have like the investigators who went to the fire would have seen that and been like, oh, the caretakers literally locked their patients in the basement. This lady's going to jail.
You know what? That makes more sense, and that's a good narrative to have.
Yeah, because
I think that if they had a clumsy throwaway line in there, like they found the failed experiment or something really clumsy like that, I almost feel like that would be better than just leaving it as it is. Because I was so confused. I didn't follow it at all.
I think
Honest.
I think I just remembered that line because it was a very quick throwaway line of her saying it was like what was all that screaming I heard? It's like it's the it's the it's the failed patients in the basement, and then that's it. That's all they say of it. It's very brief, and I wish they had brought it up a bit more. And like
Right.
I think that might actually be that's the other analog. The failed experiments are the other ornaments in his collection.
Oh, you know what? That's a good thought. I mean,
Yeah.
also you know what? We were talking about analogs. I just happened to look at my notes and I realized something because I wrote this down in two different sections. When I first saw the nurse, I wrote down that's a ridiculously stupid outfit she's wearing because it has those weird shoulder pads that point.
She was wearing
And
like a straight up Victorian like mourning dress.
yeah, like she was going to a funeral, which technically I guess she was every time she opened a door.
True.
But I look down to number 13 on the notes that I typed up. Mombi's shoulder pads are stupid because they were like these big, fancy. They clang, so I figure they're sharp, like these things that jut out from her shoulders. That's another analog. Just her outfit
It's just
isn't
ridiculous.
analog.
Because she's super
pads.
vain. Yeah. Like the whole
That's
like
crazy.
the center of her whole character is pretty much vanity. Either
I
that or
think that
I guess or just pride in general.
Yeah, I think Return to Oz has a lot more connections to the world of Kansas than the original one does because they're even pulling in like small beats that Dorothy would remember
Yeah.
before she goes unconscious, like all this stuff packed into a fairly short amount of time because let's be honest, in The Wizard of Oz, that's another note I wrote down. They are in Kansas for forever. I forgot how long they stayed there.
Yeah. There was even talk, like I read in the trivia, there was even talk of cutting the original Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which, I should just give props because I love that song to, God rest Israel Kaleo. I need to,
Oh yeah, who did the
the original song.
yeah, that's a great song.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
You'll love it. But yeah, there was actually talk in the original for actually not having that in at all because people thought that the Kansas section dragged too long.
Which, I mean, it really does. And
It really-
for all I
yeah, it
know,
kinda
the
does.
Return to Oz For all I know, the Return to Oz, Kansas section is just as long, but it was holding my attention a lot better.
Oh yeah, it
Probably
was
because they're in an asylum with people screaming.
like it really did everything. Like in that opening section, I immediately was really hooked because it really did everything a sequel slash remake should do. It comes back to the world that we know. It establishes that it's here. This is what you understand, and it doesn't like try to. It both A doesn't handhold us, but B doesn't expect us to know every detail. Like it still recounts past events, but then also says goes with it. It's like this is Dorothy. She lived in Oz. Yada yada. You know this. Um, and then it takes that world and it expands upon it. We literally see outside of their homestead. We literally see the town that she's in and then subsequently the doctor that she goes to. It's like we're in an actual vibrant world, and it's really cool to see like, oh, we're seeing the context of where they live. They literally mention it's 2 months until the year 1900. It's the advent of modern amenities and electricity and the what would be considered of the day modern medicine, even though it was still pretty much all just more art than science. Terrible, horrifying, illegitimate art, but still.
Like, that's a good point.
And so I
I do appreciate the elaboration that they go through, because you really are right. Elaborating on a world instead of just repeating the story beats
yeah.
is fairly important.
Yeah, and so many remakes and or like overdue sequels do exactly that. They just rehash the original story and don't really make it their own, which I think every remake there should be some reason to be remaking it. Either because someone wants to put an extra spin on the story that they think would benefit the story as a whole, or they think it needs to be brought up again for like modern context and like modern cultural trends, what have you. It really needs to, and a lot of places don't do that. They just do it for the brand recognition and just so they'll kind of cash things in, but they don't actually respect it. Ghost in the Shell. And so it actually has something going for it.
That's true. And I just wanted to bring one more thing up before we move off this analog topic.
Yeah.
Completely. And it's only because I just happen to look at my notes again.
Well,
I have these notes right in front of me.
Yeah, it's almost like there's necessary.
Well, I have these notes written down for my thoughts during the movie, but when I look at them, sometimes I create points in the moment out of my notes. And fairly late in the film, I wrote down, does the Gump have no analog in the real world? And I just happened to look at that, and I thought about what you were saying about the experimentation. I think that could be what the Gump is, because it's like this. It's just an assemblance of different things, all put together.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's given life. I think that's interesting that all of her companions in this one, it's not like, oh well, I'm secretly smart, but I think I'm stupid, or I cry for all the time, but I think I'm heartless. All of these characters are like beings that are alive that either shouldn't be or don't think they are. It's like this collection of furniture. It's a pumpkin on sticks that was given life, and then a robot, which by every mean is not alive, but
it's still capable of like thinking and everything.
Yeah, he cries at one point.
Yeah.
Near the end of the movie, he cries, which is like, well, he's crying. I mean, you could say like, and then you could make up all sorts of things for why that happens, but that's like symbolically in the movie. That's like, well, he's alive.
And then the only creature that actually was alive with them was what would normally be considered just a lesser creature with the chicken. So
yeah,
and that's almost the same. And I think the analog there is meant to be they're all meant to just be kind of stand-ins for Dorothy's just kind of personal feelings on the subject. Like she's being carted around and being considered this liability and this like basically not even alive. It's that all these thoughts in her head aren't real. They're just her being weird. And that maybe like, even she herself thinks maybe I'm not, good enough, or maybe I'm not real enough for these people. But and then in the end, she's like, no, like all this is real. I can accept that. And what they say doesn't matter.
That's true.
That's a very flimsy one, I admit, but at the moment I didn't really think about it too much.
No, that this movie, Return to Oz, specifically, because we're not. I don't know why I'm saying specifically. We're not talking about Wizard of Oz right now.
Yes.
But Return to Oz has a lot to do about life, death, and humanity. Like, by making people forget about Oz, he's turning them into trinkets. He's essentially killing these people, and he's becoming more and more human to the point where I completely lost the narrative at one point, and he was just like being played by the actor smoking a pipe. I was like, what happened? Why is he no longer claymation?
Yeah.
And that confused me for a bit, but leaving that behind, like, that's his whole goal. So he's also trying to gain life, and a big plot point is this desert of death where a wheeler literally accidentally touches the sand and instantly turns to sand and dies and is not alive anymore.
Yeah.
He's inanimate. He's sand. There's a surprising amount of this going throughout the course of the movie, like I'm not going to say what it is to be human. This isn't Ghost in the Shell, but like being human versus being inanimate, giving life or taking life.
Mm. I mean,
Holding life hostage like she does with the heads, or all the people that are turned to stone or turned to ornaments. There's a lot of that in this movie.
I mean, hell, it starts off with that. They go to an asylum in an age when lobotomies were a thing.
You know what? That is the truest thing I think I've ever heard.
Exactly. It's like, what's the difference of being alive? It's like, is being alive having these what would be considered these eccentric thoughts, or is it better to just be a vegetable? It's just like, like, there we go.
This is way more thought than I thought that we were going to put into Return to Oz. This is a movie no one thinks or cares about.
And like,
we are doing all the work here. This movie is like almost 40 years old, and we are uncovering new meaning behind this.
It is the only film by its director, which is a shame, and because it failed so badly. It's
it did horribly.
There's so much to talk about with it, and I genuinely love it. It's super, like, this really is one of those movies where the more you kind of turn it around your head, it's like, it's a movie that makes you think. It's like, it's a fun movie, but also makes you think. I love movies like that. It's like, a lot of those older action flicks, like RoboCop and whatnot. They're, on the surface, just good fun action, but then you actually go down and it's like, oh yeah, no, there's some deep philosophical questions going on.
Right. Whereas, with its own merit, The Wizard of Oz has that lesson of there's no place like home, which it chooses to hammer home pretty hard, but
yeah, pretty damn hard.
Right, but it definitely is like this fan. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be drinking soda during this. It definitely is this more fantastical film that has held the test of time, and I have to wonder, maybe extrapolate with me a bit on this. I don't think The Wizard of Oz is a bad film at all, but why is it that this is so fondly remembered, but Return to Oz is not? Was Return to Oz just given a bad rap because it was trying to follow up on such a classic? Is it because it's dark and maybe children didn't care for it in the theaters? I wonder why.
I mean, I think, at least in the first regard, that the reason Wizard of Oz is remembered so fondly is I think it just set a lot of benchmarks. Like, the benefit of having a film so far back is that there really wasn't a lot to choose from, and that it was still very much a burgeoning art at the time. And so anything that really kind of stood out at this point has kind of been accepted as a classic in one form or another, with the exception of a lot of the B movies. Because when was the period when the major motion picture laws would have been put into place? Like, we talked about this during A Star Is Born.
Like, it was like late 20s, early 30s. Wizard of Oz happened after that.
Yeah. Because like a lot of films before that aren't as often remembered, but then once they became mainstream and were given the option to become like these blockbusters, I think it became really easy for certain films to become just widely beloved, and with good reason. Wizard of Oz is very iconic, and there's a lot to love about it, and even today it still stands up, even with some of its effects. It's just quality made, But then compare that to the new one. I think maybe. I think. I mean, it's like, well, compare it to like I said before. Compare it to Labyrinth. Labyrinth is like lauded after. It's like people love that. It's considered a classic by a lot of people today. Maybe a cult classic, but still, I have no idea how successful it was at the time. But I think it was pretty damn successful, and that can probably be attributed to the fact that David Bowie is the main antagonist, and that was probably a pretty big name draw. But it also had really good effects. It had Jim Henson puppetry and everything. But I'm trying to think about if there was anything specific about Return to Oz. I think it really was that it was so. I mean, like obviously with the name Return to Oz, it's gonna be seen. It's gonna be immediately seen. It's like, oh, they're trying to do some random sequel of Wizard of Oz. I wish that people may have known the books a bit better, and that they maybe could have enjoyed it for what it was. As like based off of that, rather than have it be so directly connected to the Wizard of Oz, because that really didn't do any kind of favors. I mean, it's
Right.
like it's the mindset that I had when I was going into it. It's like, oh, this is just some cheap sequel, because like cheap sequels existed for decades at that point. Like they happened.
Oh yeah, they still exist.
They're
still
exist.
being made.
It's like, so like the public would have known about that already. So I don't necessarily think the darkness of it on its own would have been enough. I mean, looking at Leica films and all that sort of films, dark films don't turn away kids. Like kids like dark shit. Like that one we much at least know. But
oh, definitely now. This is definitely a period that I was not alive during, let alone growing up. So I'm not sure how that market or demographic has changed over time.
I think at the time it was like, my mindset of it has been like, any movie that came out in the 80s was okay to be dark, because you realize the political landscape at the time. I think everyone was a little dark. It's like
that's
pretty
true.
They could put up with a lot. It's like,
I definitely
it's like,
do not want to.
It's anything less than nuclear destruction, we can deal with that.
Okay, so I definitely do not want to lose this. I want to keep talking about this real quick.
Yeah.
Labyrinth was a box office failure and is actually the reason that Jim Henson stopped making movies.
Holy shit. I did not know that.
It did not do well, yeah. I think it made back half its budget, according to this.
Huh. That is something.
So...
Well, then I don't really know where they're coming in. I guess... I mean, it really kind of... I almost would have to attribute to, like, going even further into the future now. Like, today, Labyrinth is, like I said, like, a lot of people consider it a cult classic, if only because of Jim Henson's work on it, and just because of just David Bowie's in general.
Yeah.
I think maybe after he passed, that a lot of people got back into that sort of stuff.
Probably. I remember in middle school, I had never seen Labyrinth, but I saw it because there was a girl that I knew for a brief period who Labyrinth actually was her favorite film, which is the reason I ended up seeing it. But so I think it's been a cult classic for a while. But David Bowie's death probably helped it.
Probably.
I mean, so we have said a lot of great things about Return to Oz. I do want to give a few nods, like superiority nods. To
yeah, of course.
Wizard of Oz, like things that I think it does better.
And that should be said. The problem with the comparing these kind of two films like this is that one of them is one that's very much clearly meant to be a very straightforward and ultimately toothless, like family kind of fun movie, and the other one, as we've established, has a lot of distinct talking points. So it's hard to make them balance sometimes. So we should give the credit where it is.
Yeah, I don't know how you reacted to it. Wizard of Oz, very intentionally funny film.
Yes, very so.
There are plenty of moments where I actively laughed.
Yes,
at what was going on.
I absolutely love the Cowardly Lion. He's one of my favorite film characters of all time.
He leaps through a window, which I do not remember.
Yeah.
The close-up shot of the wizard's guard that's like guarding the door. The close-up shot of him crying, which is just water pouring down his face,
Uh-huh.
is one of the funniest things I've seen in a while.
It really is,
because there's no intention to make it seem like it's coming from his eyes. It's just everywhere.
Yeah, I really did love that. It's just like I want to believe that they did that with that knowledge of like we know this looks ridiculous, but that's the whole point.
Oh, I definitely think the line he says immediately after that was, "I had an Auntie M once."
Oh yeah,
which is so specific and wonderful.
It really does just has this whole feeling of I've had this thing in the back of my mind. It's got it's like Alice in Wonderland, where it's like there really is just like they're saying nonsense, and it's these things where it's like in any other situation this makes no sense, and that's ridiculous for you to say, but in this context that's hilarious.
The only difference is that not everyone is out to get Dorothy.
Yeah.
Though, if there is a Cheshire Cat analog, we're talking a lot about, or I'm talking a lot about analogs.
And
if there's a Cheshire Cat substitute in Wizard of Oz, it's definitely Glinda, who is a bitch and does like nothing the whole movie.
Oh yeah, and her actress was a bitch too, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, apparently the actress who played her was an
Billy
asshole.
Burke?
Yeah.
Oh, I had not heard this.
Versus, Miss. Dang it, I've lost the Witch of the West again.
Hamilton?
Miss Hamilton, yeah. Whereas she was like, there was so many, like, everyone wasn't sure about casting her because we were like, this lady is so nice. How are we going to do this? And, like, there were so many scenes where Dorothy's actress couldn't do the line properly because it's like she couldn't establish in her mind that she was talking to someone who was evil because she just knew Hamilton was so nice.
That's wonderful. I like hearing that.
Yeah. It's like everyone was just like, this isn't a doable thing. It's like she's too kind. And then there were so many of her scenes were actually cut because a lot of the times they most of her scenes were either cut or trimmed down because the people on set were like, we can't release this, they would be too scary.
Ooh.
Yeah, they literally like there were times where it's like she was literally scarier than we see on screen. What is widely established to be one of the scariest film villains of all time. Like to this day, she's still, not terrifying, but creepy.
Yeah, we're desensitized a fair bit at this point, but still, she does scare kids. I remember being scared of her. I actually had a friend whose mother would. This is notorious in my family now. We talk about it all the time. But her mother would not let her watch it because the witch threatens the dog.
Oh, yeah.
So at least come high school, she had never seen The Wizard of Oz. I don't know about past that point, but...
Yeah.
That's a really convincing performance. But,
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. I sort of... Oh, yeah. So... I was on a point, but now I'm going to move slightly to a different point just really quickly. What is the point of Glinda in this movie? She helps them once.
I think it's...
in the poppy field, and then I guess she kind of helps at the end, because without her, Dorothy wouldn't have known she could do the ruby slipper thing, but...
I think she's meant to be the Deus Ex Machina. Like, in every story, there has to be something that, like, is established to be an ally to the main character, and that is also a greater authority on the world they are in, whether that's a mother figure, a father figure, in this case the good, in this case the good witch. It has to be something. I guess it just has to be something that establishes that even when push comes to shove, there is still some form of guiding force beyond our own character. Because when the character is established as a doughy faced, not knowing a whole lot about the world little girl, we have to know that there's going to be something that's going to keep her going, because otherwise she is not going to get through this.
It makes you wonder where Glinda is throughout the events of Return to Oz.
Yeah,
she is entirely unhelpful and not present at all.
Yeah, who knows?
No one even mentions her name.
At least in that one, that's actually I actually really like in this one. At least in Return to Oz, it kind of goes away from that trope, which obviously. The Wizard of Oz, it's fine that it did it. It was early in the days. There weren't a whole lot of tropes to work with. It established a couple tropes, in fact. But it kind of turned that on its head in Return to Oz, where, given that Dorothy has been there before and she knows the basic layout, she actually becomes her own driving force. She knows she is of her entire group, she is the biggest authority. like she can like establish the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, up to a point, after she gets to the Emerald City, everything else that happens is pure luck. Though that is something that I'm curious about because I guess so the Doctor's whole purpose in removing Oz from her mind in Return to Oz is that she's having dreams.
She's having dreams. It's like that she's like she isn't doing her work properly. She's like basically, ridden to her bed as a result.
Right. So are these dreams in the lore her thinking about Oz, or are they her physically returning to Oz? Because there's a fair amount of information she shares with Belina and the audience in the movie that is not explored in the first film, so by all accounts she shouldn't know about it. But she does, so is she revisiting Oz in these dream sequences?
I don't.
And therefore learning more about it. She knows about the desert, she knows about lunch pail trees.
I think that might just be like that moment where it differentiates, where it's more just that these are just details that are more related to the book than anything. That if the original film had gone more on the book, we would have seen her learning about these details. I think that really is just where the separation is. I think it just it's not great storytelling. That's one of the main reasons I'm not a huge fan of Return to Oz, because it really just doesn't properly establish all of these facts that are otherwise very established in the original book, but not in the original movie that everyone is going to know versus the books. So I think it really is just kind of lazy writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, like, every now and again, that really is the purpose of things. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, when people break down an analysis and are like, "Oh, this thing was done deliberately." It's like, no, sometimes things can be done badly.
Sometimes things just kind of happen.
It's like, that famous painting of, it's like some dark night, and it's in the 1950s. It's just of a diner of a couple of people sitting in a diner, and the painting there's no door, and they actually interviewed the artist, and he was like, "What was the significance behind him having no door?" And he looks at the picture that they have, and he goes, "God damn it, man, you did it again."
Yeah.
He literally says that to the interviewer. It's like, I didn't even realize it. It's like,
I remember hearing that.
It's stuff like that. It's like every now and again, it's like, yeah, it's okay if it's just like, someone just didn't do it well.
Yeah. I'm looking too much into the lore. I'm trying to put these together, man.
Yeah.
Doing some detective work. But I don't know how much else you have for it, but I do have one more thing I want to put out there. Praising, the compare and contrast. I want to praise The Wizard of Oz for set designs, because I like the sets.
Oh yeah.
A lot more than I do in Return to Oz. Sometimes I think they feel clunky, or they're just green screen, which I love puppets. I love stop motion. I hate green screen, and I've always hated it. I never have thought that it looks any good.
Mm-hmm.
But the set designs in The Wizard of Oz are wonderful. There's so many of them. You can just imagine, like, all of these different set pieces they had to create for these different environments that are, like, Munchkin Land has so many different parts to it. It's not like one scene where she exits the house. There's stairs, there's the town hall, there's the center of the plaza with where the yellow brick road and the red brick road starts. There's like a river with a bridge. There's a lot to it, and that's just one area that she visits.
And I think The Wizard of Oz really is, like I said, it's like even establishes a few tropes. I think this movie really is the establishing movie for this, like the whole the story style of a man takes a trip, where we go to like a different land, like into a fantasy where it really does give us a complete slice of life, like, It's a Small World After All style, like fully realized set, versus a lot of things like even like with Return to Oz, where it's more just kind of meant to be a medium by which we continue. It really does have so much pride in how everything looks. Like the Emerald City looks stunning, the poppy field, even like with Munchkinland. And when I was first watching it, I paused it and was like, okay, I want to look at this set, and I want to look at it both how it looks as it is, and then comparing it to like modern day. And I looked at it, and I could it actually took me a little while to notice where the clearly painted backdrop board was, where it was just like, oh, this is just the landscape, but it's clearly just, it just stops at a painted wall. But it actually took me a second because all of it was so well realized together. I was like, oh, yeah, this is actually incredibly well done, and it stands
Yeah.
up so well. And I was even thinking about it before. Um, we talked about how Return to Oz is very scary, and to this day, the main reason I'm afraid of tornadoes, I'm not from a tornado-ridden area originally, from where I was born, but the main reason I'm afraid of tornadoes is the opening scene with the Twister in Kansas, where it just straight up shows film of a Twister in the background. It looks incredible, and it's terrifying. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't even know how they did that, actually. Like, it literally does just look like an actual Twister in the background.
Yeah, there's only one moment where I think maybe it could have been done a little better, the blending of the painted backdrop to the rest of the scenery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she comes to the split in the yellow brick road and she meets the scarecrow.
Oh,
I
right.
think that the backdrop is or the painted wall is very easy to see.
Yeah,
But
that one was
the rest of the
over.
time I wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, it's like the rest of the time it really just does blend right into everything. It was just like, all right, I'm good to go. This is where
Right.
we are. And it's just, and Return to Oz was much more expansive. Like the fact that they were able to actually like film out in the woods and not just on a closed set and that sort of thing. But as a result, it just kind of felt pretty bland. Like a lot of the, just like the main locations we are in are the brief time in the desert, the woods leading to the Emerald City, the ruined Emerald City, and then a mountain. It's pretty much just in order: sand, trees, rocks, natural rocks.
Right.
And then like
That
obviously we're back in the Emerald City at the very end, but yeah.
it's all repaired at that point, which silver and green go together very nicely.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
I don't think that's a color combination that's well utilized too often. I guess St. Patrick's Day, that's more green, but I have seen green and silver stuff on St. Patrick's Day, but
Right, right.
I'm a fan. I like it.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Uh, and I mean, the inside of the Gnome King's fortress, I think, looks great.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
especially that, and just all the claymation and the animation behind the Gnome King and like his little minions and stuff is just like beautiful.
oh yeah, I outside of the Gnome King being a comparison to the Doctor,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of I understand the more human part, but I wish he hadn't been played by a real actor near the end. Like I said, I get the point that it's going for, but I was a really big fan of stop motion Gnome King
Right.
and everything that he stood for.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Especially the scene where he falls apart because he ate an egg, which is poison, I guess.
I fail to see where any kind of analog can come in there. So if
We could probably get it if we just thought about it for an hour, but we don't got that kind of time.
is it the comparison of a scientist to pastoral life? Eh. Is it because he's an egghead?
Is that another life death analog that egg is like new life
Is it
and that brings him down?
Is it that the only thing that can truly destroy modern mechanization is the return to one's roots as a farming community that we once were?
Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The Gnome King just couldn't figure it out. Oh well.
We could go for hours. It's like the fucking question is, how is a raven like a writing desk? It's like there's no actual answer. It's just meant to fucking confuse you.
I think he just made up an answer at one point, didn't he?
I mean, pretty much.
But it also made no sense.
Yeah.
So that I mean that's all I have. Is there anywhere else that you want to go from here?
Not terribly. I mean, just just some basic stuff. It's like for as much praise as I give Return to Oz, I think the characters are just a bit more vibrant and more fun to hang out with, or as we hang out with over the course of the film in Wizard of Oz. They feel like real. It's a classic comparison of older films to me. It seems like we're watching real people interact versus, in with the downside of, in a lot of ways they can kind of blend together a bit with versus Return to Oz and more modern films. We have a much more intimate look at them, and so we establish our knowledge of them really quickly, but they don't actually seem terribly real as a result. But it's each of the trade-off.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate nature of being able to view things closer.
Yeah,
But
it's like can't hardly complain too much though.
before I guess we talk about our huge likes and dislikes, I guess.
Yeah.
I just have a few other tiny things that I want to point out. Maybe just get off my chest.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Night on Bald Mountain. I don't know if you picked it up. In Wizard of Oz, it's sampled as the trio is running up the stairs in the witch's castle to save her.
Yeah.
I picked that out immediately. It's something like older brain watching it, and I know what Night on Bald Mountain sounds like. Yeah. Apparently, a lot of classical music is sampled in the movie, just in tiny bits. But I know it so much for its songs. It's like, oh well, The Wizard of Oz is all original music, so I heard that and I had to do a double take. That was strange.
Yeah.
And for Return to Oz, I think it's strange that in the Emerald City, I don't know if you noticed in the crowd scenes where the Scarecrow's talking or she frees Ozma, there's all of these people in elegant gowns and suits, but in the background there's a frog with a bipedal frog with glasses. And I don't know what that was about. He kept showing up just in the far back of the crowd like this huge puppet that's only used there and never anywhere else. And he's the only non-human in the crowd. What is that?
That seems like it seems like maybe they just had that puppet laying around and they're like, let's just throw him in there.
Maybe there was a big glasses wearing frog narrative that got cut.
I mean, that sounds like a character from another story. I couldn't tell you what, but it sounds like it.
Well, I'm sure that's going to keep me awake at night.
Yeah. But beyond that, I don't think there's any particular reason other than screw it. It's weird. It's Oz. We can do that.
We can do whatever we want in the merry old land of Oz. So, leaving off here, favorite shot from either movie. Favorite shot, favorite scene?
From Wizard of Oz, probably it's got to be the original shot where it goes from sepia tone to color tone. Even when I first saw that when I was a little kid, and I'd seen shit like Toy Story and everything where things were incredibly vibrant. When I first saw that, I was like, oh shit, that's cool. It's a classic, and
it's good.
I'm totally down for that, just because as it's also so well establishes the change of tone and everything, how much is conveyed just with that alone. And
I could think of so many commercials that used that shot as the opening.
Yep.
To talk about Wizard of Oz on DVD or
exactly.
Whatever.
And then for Return to Oz, it's my favorite shot. Definitely, I even thought about this specifically when I saw it. It's the scene where she steals the life powder and is running out of the room with all of Mombi's heads, and it's her running by with all the mirrors and all the heads staring out at her screaming. I'm like, this is crazy, and I have not seen a film do this, at least not this well, and I think this is one of the coolest shots I've ever seen. It's balls to the wall, and it's just no, this is just crazy.
That is awesome and scary.
Yeah.
For the Wizard of Oz, for me, it's definitely, even though from a standpoint now you can see the seams, so to speak, I like the scene where the witch is commanding all of her flying monkeys to fly, and she's leaning out the window, throwing her hand everywhere. I love that. That's great.
Another classic scene.
And in Return to Oz, it's everything. In the end scene after the Gnome King eats the egg, it's him falling apart with fire spouting in the background and all of his minions that are they're constructs made of the stone poking out of the walls, and they're all shrinking back in terror, moaning and reforming into the wall. Everything about that I loved.
Oh yeah. It's just it was really cool just seeing how that entire mountain was just alive with these things.
Oh yeah, the minion constantly throughout is spying on them, forming into rocks in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really neat concept for having a spy.
Mm-hmm. It's like literally everywhere there's a stone.
The Earth is the spy.
Yeah, it's like, holy shit. Take that.
Uh,
How's that, conspiracy theorist?
so what's your favorite, and what's your reasoning?
Uh, Over the course of talking about this, I kept going back and forth. It's it's hard to say that it's hard to say like either one is my like ever. I will have a definitive favorite. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying it's like it's hard to say either one is my favorite because it just kind of feels like I'm just it makes me think of the things that it shouldn't be my favorite for. Like for Return to Oz, it's like it's not terribly vibrant, but it's still cooler in my mind. And then but versus I give it to Wizard of Oz, it's like, well, it's it's a classic. Everyone's gonna say that sort of thing, and so I just kind of go back and forth in my head. But I got it. Like at the end of the day, I always say it's like which one do I think is just the better made film, and or at the very least, which one am I going to think about more? And that's got to be Return to Oz. It's just there's
Really?
so much going on with it that I think just isn't it's very underrated for it. I mean, heck, we went down we opened up a can of worms with all the various analogs we were finding, and just that alone establishes a good movie should have you thinking about it continuously. Whereas I watched Wizard of Oz, and it's like, yeah, I know this story. I was already done thinking about it before the credits came up. It was like I know this movie. It's hard to kind of deviate from it. There's not a whole lot going on beyond what is an admittedly good story, but it's not a terribly deep story. It's like that's not, I know not every story needs to have that, but for me, it's just compared to the two. If I saw Wizard of Oz on TV, I probably wouldn't flip to it just as myself. But if I saw Return to Oz, I'd probably be like, yeah, I want to go back to see that. You know, I like watching how the puppetry works. I like just the scene with all the wheelers, how crazy they are, and all those sort of things. It's like I like just watching all these just like individual little elements, for even if they're not as vibrant or as on the surface enjoyable. It's just I just think they're very interesting.
Right, right. I gotta say, hearing you talk about both movies as we were discussing it, I'm actually kind of surprised with your final choice.
Really?
Just, well, I really like Return to Oz. I just figured the way you were talking about, the writing's not always good, the characters.
Yeah, I mean,
like the getting close to the characters, but
it's like not to say that this is a flawless movie by any stretch, and
oh, definitely not.
And so many of my movies aren't, like my favorite movies aren't, and it's just it's the thought process that though a lot of the writing and some of the elements are bad, it's at least establishes that someone took the risk to try them, versus Wizard of Oz, it kind of just does its one thing and then we're good. So it's just it's the fact that it's like we can either watch a train going into the station or I can watch a train wreck. It's like am I a bad person for watching a train wreck? Probably. Will people think less of me for it? Definitely. It's still interesting.
You got to tell me where you get your analogies because I want to go shop there sometime.
It's it's a lack of therapy and a weird head, man.
But I definitely do not disagree with you, and I'm glad you brought that up, the internal monologue, because sometimes I see a really popular movie like The Wizard of Oz and we're discussing it and it's like, that is such a classic. Like, is going with that the right move, or will it just be going with it because other people like it?
Right.
And it is like the movie. But especially in this instance, I think that I am of complete sound mind and body in saying that I prefer Return to Oz over Wizard of Oz. Well, of course, me definitely, but I mean, there's a ton of reasons that I do.
Well, yes.
I mean, I'm a horror movie fan. It's not a horror movie, but I definitely prefer the dark and the creepy and the scary set pieces and designs and just characters in general. I have always been a huge fan, and I've been very outspoken about it on this very show, of puppets and puppetry. I love puppets and puppetry. Stop motion is great. And I think we've talked about this on numerous occasions, but however you go about deciding your films, which is usually, I think usually your metric for deciding it is would you pass it if you were flipping through the TV and it came on.
Pretty much.
And I have a hard time looking to the future. I always focus on the now, and it's like, well, it's not even what did I think was a better film, because overall I think The Wizard of Oz is a better film. I think it's better made. It doesn't, like, the green screen really does take Return to Oz down a few notches for me. The Wizard of Oz, like, does what it does within its means.
Right.
And does it very well. But I had more fun watching Return to Oz. I was more invested in it. And it's not even like, well, it was a new movie, I didn't know the premise. I'd seen both of these before, just a long time ago. And perhaps The Wizard of Oz is so renowned and revered, and it's so in the consciousness of us as a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows it, and maybe that does hinder it a little bit, just in that we all know the story that's being told. But I'm confident in my choice, and that I just enjoy overall the narrative that Return to Oz is telling and the way that it chooses to tell it.
Yeah, yeah. It's, I don't really know how to answer it beyond that. I fully agree with what you're saying.
That's great. It's a great movie. So,
yeah, it's horribly underrated, and I'm so sorry that director, got such a bad rap with it.
Everyone go out and watch it immediately.
It deserves to be a cult classic.
It deserves to be seen. And Disney live action stuff like gets a lot of bad raps, like like Pirates of the Caribbean, not even pre-Pirates, like pre-Mighty Ducks. Like a lot of that gets a bad rap, but this is a good one.
Yes. This is worth it. This is worth your time, if only for the talking points alone.
So, with all of that said, I guess, I'll just go through the things real quick.
Yeah, just read through the socials.
Yep. You can go through TheyRemadeIt.com. That's an archive of all the episodes you can find there. It also shows you all the different podcast platforms that we're on. iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Podbay, Spreaker, I think, still, but I haven't been talking to them. We're on break.
Yeah.
You can email us at theyremadeit@gmail.com. Anything would be appreciated there.
As always, we love any kind of comments.
Oh yeah, comments, thoughts about the future, anything like that. Please review us and rate us on iTunes.com. It'll help the metrics. Leave a review. We'd like to hear from you. I personally would love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's our usual deal.
It remade it on remade on Twitter. I forgot.
The Twitter.
I'm a twit. All right, so
how dare you? This is a fun one. I liked this one.
Me too. I can't wait to see where we go from here in the future. What else we are going to tackle, because I keep being pleasantly surprised on these.
Yeah, I mean, except for last week.
Well, we don't. You mean a couple weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago, whatever.
We don't talk about
time means nothing when we talk about that crap. As always, then I am your host Stuart,
and I'm your host Jacob,
and we hope you guys have a lovely evening. Go watch that movie; it's awesome.
Goodbye.
All right. I'll go in there for Dorothy. Wicked witch, oh no wicked witch. Gods and no gods, I'll tear them apart. Oh, I may not come out alive, but I'm going in there. There's only one thing I want you fellas to do.
What's that?
Talk me out of it.